Thank you, Holly, and welcome everyone. This is a very, very disruptive time in the learning and development industry and the profession, so I'd like to give you my perspectives on this. I have been an industry analyst and a researcher in this space since around 2000 or 2001, so it's been about 16 years, and I come from several other sort of careers before this in technology and marketing. So I come with quite a bit of perspective and have seen quite a few cycles in the L&D profession. So I'm going to try to give you a sense of not only what's going on today, but what it means relative to what's happened in the past. So I'm going to use the word digital learning just for a minute because it's the best term we can think of. But basically everything in business is going digital. And as you think more and more about the retailers you do business with, the way you travel, the way you go to the store to shop for clothing, the way you do your banking, the way you do your insurance. I just talked to a company today that's going to come up with instant insurance, for example, where you can buy insurance on demand for the activity you're about to participate in. They're all going digital, and yet our brains and our minds and our ability to learn is still human. So there's a lot of change going on in digitizing and figuring out what digital means to learning, and that's been sort of the focus of this. So let me give you some context, and then I'll take you through digital learning and what's going on in the learning industry. The first is there's a probably bigger demand for learning now than I've seen in all the 15 years I've been an analyst. And one of the reasons for that is because there's so much business disruption. You probably know that roughly the age of an S&P 500, the tenure of an S&P 500 company today is only about 14 to 15 years. It's dropped by a factor of 3 in the last 2 decades. And 90% of the companies that were surveyed by MIT in the study that we just did here are telling us that they believe their business models are being disrupted, and only 5% of them believe they have the right people, the right skills, the right leadership to adapt to this new world, because everything around us has changed. How we operate, how we design and sell products, what the products are, how we use data, and so there's a lot of IP being created. In fact, if you look at the issue of IP in the United States, almost 90% of stock market value of corporations is now based on human assets, which means people, software, brand, services, processes, so what I like to say is really people are your product regardless of what industry you're in. And so our ability to skill and train and enable and facilitate people is critical, plus the fact that training is really also an engagement tool, as I'll show you. So we have a lot of impact on what we do. We also know that as the world has become more technology enabled, we've become more distracted. In fact, I'm going to show you some data on this, but despite the exponential growth in technology and communications that we have today with social networking, video, search, all the other technologies we have, to say nothing of AI, we are not improving business productivity. Output per hour worked is almost flat in the United States, Canada, UK, Germany, most big mature developed countries. That is a problem. That's created income inequality. It's created business transformation. It means that your company can be upset by somebody else. And so one of the reasons for that is the change needed in skills. And part of the other issue that's creating a demand for learning is the fact that the old model of business, where we used to go to work for a company and traverse up the hierarchy over a period of decades and learn more and more and more within a single business function. I mean, when I went to work for IBM in the 1980s, there were most of the people in the sales organization had been there their entire career for 30 or 40 years, and they had stayed at IBM and they had moved up the path of sales professionals at IBM. That's just not the way business works anymore. All of the high-performing companies in the MIT research have really thrive on multifunctional projects, multifunctional teams. We work as a network. We're constantly reaching out and communicating with people in other parts of the organization, and we need to build relationships with them. So learning has become a part of our daily life at work, even though we're all pretty busy. And in addition to that, of course, we also have a change in the nature of who's working for us. In the days when I entered the workforce, 80 to 90% of the workforce was on the balance sheet, hourly or salaried labor. During the last decade or so, most of the companies that I talk to tell me that 30 to 40% of their workforce is either contingent or part-time or outsourced. And over time, as you all know, machines, AI, software, robots will be taking over more of those. So the way the work gets done is changing, again, creating demand for learning, capability development, and changes in every job that we have. And if you don't believe that's enough, there's even more. Learning is probably the most important engagement tool you have as well. If you look at the data on millennials, people 35 years old and under, mostly people that are in the first stages of their career, they only want to work for companies that offer them development. And this data shows that if you compare all the different benefits that we provide at work against each other and correlate them against whether a company would be recommended as a place to work, learning and development is number one amongst people in their early stages of their career. In the research we did with MIT, they found that business leaders that feel that they are not able to participate in the right projects and lead the right kind of work to develop skills, for example, in digital business, are 15 times more likely to leave your company to find places where they can develop those skills. So skills development is a critical part of the value proposition for your company, whether you like it or not. Here's the data on that one. It's really shocking. You can download this from the Deloitte website if you're interested in it. It just came out this week. Providing an opportunity for development is critical to your entire value proposition and your employment brand. Okay, so given all that, what's going on in L&D? How are we doing, and what do we need to do next? And sort of the question I would ask is, how do we reinvent the learning function like everything else? Well, so far we're not doing super well. You can look at the data on this, on this chart. Not only is there increased demand, but we're kind of falling behind. We did a project. We produced our high impact learning organization research about 2 months ago. Actually, I think it was in May. And one of the things we found amongst more than 1,000 companies, when we asked companies, both business and HR leaders, would you recommend your L&D department or your training to your peers? The net promoter score of L&D is -8, which would be a very big embarrassment for any of your products and services that you sell to customers. So we have fallen behind. Why is that? It's not because we're not trying. It's not because we don't know what we're doing. It's not because we're not the right people in the right jobs. It's that it's changed blindingly fast. If you go back, about 8 to 10 to 15 years during my period of time in this industry, we've gone from a world of e-learning where everything was going to go online, and we built page-turning courses based on the browser, and we ran everything on Flash, and we had absolutely no mobile devices, to a period where all of the learning technology turned into talent management. We spent all our time looking at career development and talent models and competency-based learning, and all the LMS vendors became talent management vendors. Then we came into this world of video, self-authored learning, YouTube, Google, 70-20-10, trying to build a new model for blended learning, to build what we call continuous learning. And the LMS market tried to become more usable and more sustainable on a regular basis to this new world of digital learning. And if you look at all of the things on this chart that have changed, it's a lot. And it's only been, 15 years or so. And it takes companies time to replace their technology and replace their processes. Most of the learning management systems that I was involved in helping companies buy early in our business here lasted 7 to 10 to 12 years before they were replaced. So we don't sit around and replace all our technology every year. We only get to do it once every decade or so. So we're suffering from a lot of, essentially momentum that we have to build back up. And now we have AI and smarter tools and augmented reality. I went to see, by the way, an augmented reality tool the other day for learning that just blew my mind. That was probably the best learning tool I've ever seen. You have to wear the goggles to use it, but the goggles aren't that expensive. So all of these things have come within the last 3 to 5 years, And we're still kind of trying to catch up. And so what I'm going to do in this presentation is kind of show you what this means. Now, part of the reason that all of these new things have happened is because work has changed. We don't sit around the office, waiting for things to do anymore. Things come at us. And unlike the computers that we use and the phones that we carry around, we as humans need to rest. We need to talk to each other. We need to think. We need to absorb. We need to reflect. We need to try things. There's a human nature that is different from machines. And this has created quite a bit of overload. Not only are people overwhelmed at work, and you can see all the data on this chart, but they're working more hours. And this is sort of the sad thing about technology and why I'm so focused on this part of the research right now. But and we're doing a bunch of research on next generation work practices, by the way, that I can talk to you about in a couple months. But we're working more hours. We're getting less sleep. We're getting less rest. And there's a lot of focus in businesses about wellness and well-being and mindfulness and programs like yoga because we don't have the time. And so if you want to create a learning experience that's going to stick in your company, you have to accept the fact that a lot of the learning that's going to happen is going to be done in very short periods of time between other things. And I'll show you a methodology for that in a minute. And that has changed a lot of the market too. If I look at the e-learning that I was involved in building in the early 2000s, that's still out there on most of the learning platforms, it was slow, it was ponderous, it had a lot of slow audio. You had to click through it page by page. These days, it looks like molasses. I mean, back then it was brilliant. But we've all become very, very impatient, and our expectations for how quickly we're going to learn things have been much higher. And I think it's going to get worse because we now have tools entering the market from Google and Facebook and Microsoft and Slack and IBM and Cisco and others that are giving us, including Trello and HipChat and all of these new tools, that are giving us instant communication in messaging form and email form and online video. So, you think that the learning world is distracting, before we had all this stuff and we just had email. It's getting worse. So how do we do that? Well, I think that the taxonomy and the best way that I can describe what's happening is a simple model like this, which I sort of developed earlier this year, and I think it's just a simplification of this complex environment. There are essentially two types of learning problems or experiences that you will have at work and that your people have at work. Micro and macro. Micro learning is a situation where you need to learn something now. I'm trying to get into my PC and I can't figure out how to change my password. I'm trying to enter an opportunity into Salesforce and the system's not doing what I want and I need help. I'm talking to a customer and they ask me for something and I absolutely don't know where it is and I don't have time to take a course and I maybe missed it or maybe I forgot it. I need to find somebody that can help me. I'm writing a piece of code and I forgot the algorithm I needed to know or the subroutine. I want to look it up. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of these real-time performance support type learning experiences going on every day. And companies like YouTube, Grovo, many others have decided they're going to allow and build and let others build what are called micro-learning experiences. I was trying to do some stuff on Excel the other day. I was doing some analysis of some data. I had forgotten how to create subtotals. I went into Google. I typed subtotals in Excel. I found a video. I watched the video, and within about 2 minutes, I was back in action. In fact, it was probably more like a minute. I'm not going to take a course in Excel. I don't want a course in Excel. I just want to do this one thing. What's the criteria for that kind of learning? Is it useful? Is it accurate? Is it up to date? Like I don't want the subroutine for Excel version 2005 if I'm in Excel version 2010. Is it from a trusted source? And a lot of the micro-learning that we need at work can come from our peers. And as I'll show you in a couple of minutes, you can now very easily create an environment where people are sharing learning with each other, and it is automatically self-rated by the technology or the users, and you can find the things that are the most useful and the most highly rated by your peers online. And those might be videos, article, code, samples, books, pages, artifacts, diagrams, PowerPoints, on and on and on and on. And this is something we dreamed about 15 years ago, but it's really, really easy to do today. And if you're not doing this, if you don't have a micro-learning infrastructure, I would say you should. And I'll talk to you about a little bit more on how to do that in the next slide. The second half of this is what we call macro-learning. And, I don't know if you want to call it something else, you can. But it's basically a problem where I need to learn something that I really don't understand yet. And I need to learn the fundamentals, the basics, the history. I want to know why and how this domain exists. I want to learn not only what it is, but how to do it. I want to practice it. I want to try it. I want to get some coaching and some feedback. The only way to do that is to put more time into the learning, to learn it over an extended period of time, oftentimes with an instructor or a coach. I'm going to need to come back to it and do it over in what is called a spaced learning format, because I can't take macro learning and eat it all at once. It's like I can't eat an entire week's of food in one day. It takes a week to absorb it. And these are courses, classes, MOOCs, programs, multifaceted programs, blended learning programs. You can call them whatever you want. And a lot of times they're designed now using design thinking to be personified for the role or job you're in. So new hires at RBC Bank in Canada that go into the branches have a particularly interesting, very carefully designed 1-year-long macro learning experience they go through that it includes courses, collaboration, mentoring, connections to other people, experiences, projects, assignments, and so forth. And that was a carefully designed, relatively expensive thing, but the ROI of that is enormous because there's so many people that need to go through that major program of learning something new. Now, how does this actually work in the real world? It tends to look like this, and all of you can really appreciate this. When you start a new job in any company, you start at the bottom of the learning curve, and you move up, and you hopefully reach some peak at some point, and then you plateau, and then you say, I've kind of got this under control, and for a while the job gets a little bit boring. And then if it's a good company and you have a good talent management program and a good boss, you'll go back up the learning curve. You'll get a developmental assignment. You'll get more interesting projects. You'll get promoted. You'll get moved to a new thing. And that'll be good. If you don't have a good boss, you don't have a good company, you don't have good management, you'll continue to go down the learning curve. You'll feel like you're getting stale. You'll begin to think, gee, why am I working here? Why am I in this job? I wonder if I'm falling behind. Maybe I'm not keeping up. And you will either leave the company, you will become very disengaged, you might even retire in place, which happens in a lot of companies. You'll start creating problems, you'll have errors, you might have safety problems, all sorts of things will happen. So this is the cycle we need to deal with. And I think this cycle is a good little picture. It's a simple picture, but I think it helps you decide how to design good learning interventions. The question we have to ask is, how can we create learning alive, relevant, and vital given that cycle? Well, I think the model you have to think about is in the early stages of your job, and I don't mean your career, I mean your job, there's macro learning needed. And when you're in a transition point, you need macro learning too. Onboarding is a form of macro learning, new hire training, changing roles, becoming a manager, becoming a senior manager, becoming a director, becoming a VP, becoming a general manager, moving from HR to sales, from sales to HR, from marketing to sales, back and forth. Those are all transitions that are vitally important in business today. Talent mobility is critically important, and we need to provide macro learning interventions between them. And sometimes those are going to be very people-oriented. They're going to be mentorships, developmental assignments, and bosses and managers have to be involved. In between that, we have lots of opportunities for micro-learning. So don't try to take a course like leadership development and put it into micro-learning. The micro-learning course might be how to deal with an irate employee, or how to have a one-on-one, or what to do when somebody complains about sexual harassment, a checklist. Quick things that are complementary and reminders that are needed, but they're not going to change your entire career or the trajectory of your job. So And the other part of this model is the fact that at some point in this cycle, your employees are going to want to get credit for what they did. When I finished, 3, 4, 5 years in sales, and I hit my numbers every year, and I'm ready to be promoted for manager, I want people to know why I got promoted. I want them to know what I know, and I want them to know that, I want to get some form of credential. So credentialing your people is just as important as it ever was before, and people value that tremendously. So this is really the world we live in, including the fact that at some point all of your employees become teachers. And they don't have to be way in the far right of this chart to do that. I was over at Visa University talking with them last week or the week before, and they said that one of the most popular courses that was developed internally by an employee for the rest of Visa is a course on cybersecurity, which was developed by a person in India who isn't even in the security department. He just happens to be a very avid technologist who learned a lot about it. So we can all be part of this. As far as MOOCs, we thought MOOCs were going to be really revolutionary. They were very exciting in the early days. I'll tell you, my perspective when they first started, they did remind me a lot of the old stuff we used to build in the early 2000s. They have not turned out to be as important as we thought. They are interesting and valuable for many, many people, oftentimes people outside of a company that want to learn new things, that quickly want to get involved in technologies they don't know a lot about, but they haven't been as useful in corporations because they weren't designed around the model I just told you. They're more designed around the academic model where somebody signs up for a course for 3 months and then finishes it. Now, a lot of companies still do that, and that's still necessary in a lot of programs. We've done some programs recently with companies training digital leaders and creating digital master's degrees and teaching people whole new domains that take many months. But the MOOCs are not the answer. The MOOCs are usually academic types of courses, although they're changing, and most of the MOOC companies have now woken up to the fact that the corporate world kind of needs a different model. The other thing that's new that wasn't really considered in the e-learning days of the past is this, and I think this is a very profound idea that I want to just put in front of everybody. Let's suppose you have a bunch of micro-learning and you have a bunch of articles and blogs and videos and all this content. And people start using it. Are they really going to learn anything from it, or is it just going to be entertaining? It turns out if you look at history of research that was done on learning technical subjects, and this was actually done in a medical school, I think it was at Purdue, where they were trying to figure out how they could better teach medical students all about anatomy, where you have to learn thousands and thousands of things about the human body. And what they found is that there is a decay, rapid decay, of memory. And when you teach somebody something, they will forget it relatively quickly. And, it's a decay over time that they forget a whole bunch of it very quickly, and then the rest of it they forget later. But if you remind them on a periodic basis, the curves tilt outward. And you can see those gray curves as you move to the right are starting to flatten out. Because what's happening is you're repeating things. You're giving people time to absorb the material, you're allowing them to change context, and then you're re-engaging the mind again on the same topic later, creating neurons, activating neurons that were not used before to come back, and you're building new neural pathways. It's a very interesting model, and it's called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. And if you read up on it, what you find is that they've statistically proven that instead of giving people a lot of training at one time, if you give them a small amount of what's called spaced learning, interactions and interactivities and education and information that comes at regular periods of time, not all at once, with questions in between that force the learner to retrieve the information and activate the information they just learned, the forgetting curve flattens out significantly. So there are now some platforms that actually are designed around this. There's one called QStream, there's one called Exonify, there's one called Practice, and there's others that are sort of facilitating this idea that this isn't just a problem of throwing a bunch of content out there and making it easier for people to find it, but also arranging it and delivering it in a format that makes it useful. Now, some of the examples of this are pretty powerful. One of the clients I talked with about this is using this type of technique for safety training in their warehouses. And the way it works is every time you come into work, you get a 1 or 2 minute safety video carefully created by the system and a couple of questions, and then you go to work. And the next day you get another one, and the next day you get another one. And they have seen a 30 to 40% reduction in unsafe practices and accidents as a result of this spaced learning. Imagine in sales training where people never have enough time to learn how powerful this could be. Customer service training. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So this is one of the new domains that's been created by the world of digital learning. Now, it's a little bit even more than that. Not only do we have this issue of new content and new forms of content and new ways to arrange the content, we also have the issue of what is the job. And let me just touch on this for a minute because it will take me to the next topic. We used to basically say when we have, the way we used to create a job is we would actually design a job, we would design an organization, we'd say, for every 10 people we need a manager, we'd create a bunch of job descriptions, and then we would go out and search for people that have the skills required to do that job, and maybe we could even find somebody who's done that job before. And that was fine in the days when jobs didn't change all the time. But these days, and this is certainly my experience, I think most of you would agree with this, the first day you start a new job, it's not what you thought. And most of the things that were written down in the job description were written down as, what we kind of think the job is or we kind of want the job to be, but it isn't really that. It's really a bunch of other things. And so the way jobs are being designed today is we say we need some work done. We have a bunch of people, and we have some software, and we have some tools. How can we arrange the people to facilitate and leverage and take advantage of the technologies in the best possible way, and what are the skills and capabilities we need in those people? And the concept of a job and a job description, I think, is going to go away, to be honest. I mean, it'll never completely go away, but I think as a concept it's becoming much less relevant. Now we really want to know, here's the projects, here's the tasks, here's the activities that you need to know how to do. Do you know how to do design? Do you know how to do engineering? Do you know how to write software? Do you know how to do statistics, et cetera, et cetera? Here are the teams in which you will do them, the projects that you will be a part of, and the groups of projects that you will be a part of. Here are the people that we need, the types of roles that we will create, and then go out and look for the experience and experiences that will contribute to this work that needs to get done. So in other words, we're now staffing work. We're not filling jobs. It's a completely different idea, and it affects recruiting, it affects assessment, it affects training, everything. And if you're trying to put together a career model or a learning program for your company, I would suggest you think about it this way, because the jobs as they're defined today are likely to change, but the work itself may not. And this is where L&D comes in. In addition to that, we're living longer. So, we're going to live, our kids are going to live into their hundreds, most likely. I'm hoping I can live to 100, but we'll see how that goes. And so during this long career we're going to have, this 50, 60, 70-year career, we're going to be working for many companies, and, technologies will completely change, jobs will completely change, job functions will change. I'm in the middle of writing a book on this. It's very amazing how many things are changing in business. And so we have to provide these learning experiences because people want to learn all the time. I mean, it used to be you went through entry-level training, you went to work, and then you retired. That just isn't the way the world works anymore. Your employees are really going through a process of continuous education, continuous working, and continuous leisure. And if you can design a strategy that accommodates that kind of environment, then you've made a major step forward. And in addition to that, more and more of the jobs that are being created as a result of machines are more and more creative. I won't tell you exactly, give you the details of this slide, but basically what it's showing you is that the highest performing economies in the world, the countries and locations that have the highest business performance, highest growth rates, most innovation, are those with the most creative jobs. So you need to find ways to get rid of the non-creative jobs in your company, outsource them or automate them, and create more creative jobs, which means that you will have even more development needs. And we've seen this in all of our research. Career models have changed. Companies are really struggling to figure out how to build new career assessment tools, new career assessment portals. And and self-assessment tools, and lots of AI is being applied to this as well. So there's going to be some really exciting things there. And so I would suggest to you that, again, as you think about where learning has been and where learning is going, think about this new world of careers, and are you building an infrastructure and a set of programs and practices and a culture that will facilitate this idea of, I want to change roles, I believe I know what I need to do next, how do I get the help, is there somebody to help me, can I find people to help me, will I be rewarded for this? All of those are factors in the new world of learning. Okay, I've been going kind of fast, so let's slow down for a minute and go back to where I started. What is digital learning? I suggest my definition is very simple. Digital learning does not mean learning on a digital device. It doesn't mean learning on your phone. It means learning that meets you where you are. The word digital no longer means technology. It means available as I need it. The digital ride experience you get from Uber or Lyft is something you can get on your phone instantaneously wherever you are. The digital shopping experience you get at Walmart or Amazon is available instantly and is personalized to you. It isn't the technology that's important. The technology is invisible. It's the way it's designed. This idea of this insurance product I mentioned earlier, somebody came up with the idea that there's a market for insurance when you need it. When you get on the plane, you might decide you want to buy insurance. If it was instantly available on your phone, you might pay $10 for a little bit of an extra insurance rider, and think about the profitability of that to the insurance company. That's what digital means. It means moving whatever it is we're providing, in this case learning, to be instantly available as needed, personalized in the flow of work. Now, personalization of learning is not a new idea. I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time, but now we have all of the examples, models, and actually infrastructure to do it. And so we really think this is maybe the most profound thing that's happened. And one of the things that's happened that's facilitated this is technology standards. For those of you that have been in the learning industry a long time, and I'm sure quite a few have, you know, when we started the e-learning thing in the early 2000s, the biggest thing that really facilitated that was this technology called SCORM. SCORM was really an evolution of something called AICC, which was technology that allowed us to track CD-ROM training. And SCORM allowed us to track e-learning. And the SCORM standard facilitated the growth of the learning management systems industry, which Cornerstone obviously did very well as a part of, because we can now buy off-the-shelf software that would manage and track all of this content that people are using. Well, somewhere, you know, around the mid-2010, 12 or so, when we stopped using all the traditional e-learning, the SCORM tracking suddenly didn't seem as useful. I mean, it's not useful, but it's not as useful as it used to be, because we can't figure out where you are in the course and how much time you spent on it, and a lot of things are not available. And we started getting all this content in video that was self-authored, and it wasn't designed to SCORM standards. It didn't have chapters. It didn't have reusable objects. All these things that were built into SCORM, we had no way of tracking it. Well, now we do. A new standard was created with the help of some folks like Mike Rustisi, who actually kind of developed a lot of it, called XAPI, or the Experience API. And what it does is it essentially tracks every interactivity you have with any form of content, exactly like the way Google or your browser tracks where you click. And that stream of data is available in a server that is called a learning record store, and you can go back and say, you know, this course, everybody's clicking here, and they skipped this chapter, and this video nobody's clicked on in 10 years, except for these people. You can now get all that data. So we suddenly have, you know, in the early stages, a lot of data about what's going on in this new digital learning world that we didn't have before. And my point is not that you need to necessarily use all this data in a huge way yet, you know, although some of you will. It's that we now have the infrastructure to manage digital learning in the way we want to manage it. We want to know who's using it and what they're using it for and what's valuable and what's not valuable. There's no point just throwing a bunch of videos out there and hoping people can find them. And this has happened. I mean, this is data from our fact books. In the last 6 years, this data is about a year and a half old, but you know, we've seen a huge shift away from traditional self-study, e-learning, towards much more dynamic forms of training. You can see this here. And you can also see, if you look at the far right of this chart, growth in on-the-job training and apprenticeship. And the reason for that is that as we did away with a lot of self-study and instructor-led training, it had to be replaced with the human in work, the manager, the boss, the peer, the mentor, the expert, the SME. Those guys and gals who are out there in your company have become more important than ever. They're authoring stuff. They're the ones that are sharing articles with other people. They're the ones that are telling other people where to look for things. And so there's no way you can do digital learning without tapping into the culture and the facilitation of learning that takes place, in your organization. Interestingly, I found this study over the last couple of months done by Don Taylor. Already the market is beginning to show signs of making these changes. If you look at his research he did in the his learning technology study earlier this year, the hottest new areas of learning are personalization, adaptive delivery, collaborative and social learning, which is not a new idea, but it never kind of worked in the past, MicroLearning, and things like AI and mobile delivery are becoming more embedded and invisible. We don't really know they're there anymore. I actually think the conversations about AI are going to disappear, and we're not even going to talk about it because it'll just be the way things work. And MOOCs have gone down in performance because I think they've kind of played their way out and we're finding we need something a little bit different. The MOOC vendors will figure that out. And also we've found that we need new capabilities. One of the things that came out in the High Impact Learning Organization research is really tremendously different makeup of what we do in the L&D function. We don't do nearly as much teaching and content development. We do a lot more curation, taxonomy, tagging, design thinking, personalization, analytics, developing of apps. Those are, kind of the new things we have to do in the L&D function. So we have to become digital just like our marketing people do and the other parts in our company. The final thing I want to talk about on this issue of digital is culture. Digital may feel like a panacea, and you may believe, or a vendor might tell you, that if you buy my thing, my platform, my tool, everything's going to take off and it'll be fantastic. And that is absolutely not true. I know this from talking to many, many companies. Digital learning doesn't happen on its own. You need to have a culture of learning. You need to give people time. You need to give people rewards. You need to incent and motivate and reward managers for taking time to help other people. You need to create talent models and reward systems that allow experts to spend time creating content and sharing with others. You need to build reward systems that allow people to move from job to job so that they can take advantage of the learning that they have. Let's suppose they go through some heavy lifting to learn some new piece of software or something, and then we say, I'm sorry, you can't have that job. We don't want you moving into that position. We're going to hire somebody from the outside because you've never done it before. There's all of these things are cultural. And the example of the company that's been written about a lot that I'd like to point out is AT&T. AT&T is a 150-year-old company that's been in the telecommunications business from practically the days of the Pony Express. I don't know if it quite went back that far, but it's pretty far. I know they started with the telegraph, the Morse code, and they are still the most contemporary, up-to-date, modern technology, in any industry you're going to find. And the way they've done that is through a relentless focus on continuous learning and having a learning culture. They build systems to learn. They pay people and incent people to develop new skills. And their mandate from the CEO is reinvent yourself or leave. We don't want you here if you're not willing to reinvent yourself. We're not going to spoon feed you what you need to know. And that culture creates demand for digital learning, and it gives you the change management capabilities and the pull to take advantage of the tools that we're going to talk about next. So don't forget the culture is important. If you don't really kind of get this culture thing, we have a whole study on this called High Impact Learning Culture, which is one of the most successful projects we've ever done here. And it'll teach you, what are the 20 or 30 things you need to think about relative to culture. So what happened to the technology? What happened to the LMS? What happens to all these talent management systems that we bought, all these development tools, video tools, webinar tools and all that stuff. Where does that all fit? Well, in the old days, we used to think that the LMS was the center of the universe, and the LMS vendors like that. That's not true anymore. The LMS is a part of the infrastructure, and it's a pretty big part. You can see we drew the circle relatively big there, but it is just a part. In most companies, the LMS is primarily used for compliance. Certainly at Deloitte it is. And so I never really log into it. I get an email about my compliance, whatever it is, and I click on it and it logs me in and shows me the course. But I don't log into the LMS and browse around. And so until the last couple of months, most of the LMS vendors were struggling to figure out what they could do to participate in this new digital learning world. Cornerstone, the company that's sponsored this conference, this event, actually has really pioneered some new things here. Cornerstone basically took the functionality that comes from what we call learning experience platforms, products that allow you to quickly curate and share and produce information on mobile and other internet-connected devices, and they built it into their LMS. Skillsoft is working on a similar product. It's probably maybe a little bit 6 months or a year behind. Saba has capabilities like this now that are coming along. Oracle's working on some stuff here. SAP has a whole range of tools for this that are sold with different names. Workday Learning is a video-based learning platform. So the LMS vendors are all adapting. But they came from a different world. They came from that older world that I showed you earlier. They have to manage compliance programs and lots of business rules, so they can't do all this. So my message to you is you're going to end up with, half a dozen to a dozen tools in your learning infrastructure, unless you're a small company, in which case you probably can do it with one or two. And they're going to fall into all these different areas. And that's just the way the world works. Now, we're going to try to keep up with all this. They basically fall into these major categories. The hottest new category is the one in the upper left, which we call learning experience platforms. And the reason we call them that is because rather than doing learning management, they develop a learning experience. The learning management system has an M in it, and the M stands for management. And what that means is those products were designed to handle compliance rules, business rules, learning pathways, prerequisites, e-commerce, literally thousands of features that are required to run training, but they have nothing to do with the user experience of training and the experience of training. So these learning experience platforms are new. There are also platforms that are more like program experience platforms, Intrepid, NovoEd, OpenX, Everwise, others that are designed to facilitate a macro-learning program using technology. You might find your LMS does that, but you'll probably find these tools are more flexible and more modern than the way the LMS does that. Then there are the micro-learning platforms designed to handle spaced learning, contextual learning, adaptive learning when you do micro-learning programs. There's obviously thousands of assessment tools. There's assessment tools, for years, but there's new ones that are based on AI that can basically measure the learning activity of people based on their behavior and give you more intelligent information. There are tools now that can read text and turn it into intelligent questions. So if you want somebody to learn what's in the book of coffee and you're a coffee company, this software will read the book for you and it'll ask questions so people will know whether they've learned what's in the book or not, and you don't have to videotape somebody reading the book. Obviously, there's content libraries proliferating everywhere, and that's just going to continue to be more. And there's LMS platforms and these things called learning record stores. I'm not going to tell you I've covered quite everything, but this picture should give you a sense of the new landscape and where it is. Someday maybe all this will come from one vendor. Today it doesn't. And I doubt that it ever will, but, things do consolidate for a while, and maybe if we have a recession and we stop all the innovation we have right now, we'll go back to a market of kind of one core platform until the next, innovation cycle comes back again. Now, what does this look like in a real-world environment? Well, I've been fortunate enough to visit with GE and Visa and some really cool companies, Nestle and some others, and really see what they're doing. And this is GE's model. This is kind of the way it works. The learner, by the way, I think you can throw away the word learner and just call them an employee or teammate. because they're always learning. It's not like they're shifting from employee to learning. That's one of just my little kind of bugaboos. They're going to have access to many, many things, and it's going to look more like a hub and spoke and less like one single platform. Now, if you're big enough like IBM to build a learning platform that encompasses this into one portal, great. GE's done that. A lot of, Qualcomm's done that. A lot of companies have done that. But you may have, a bunch of places where people go for learning, and they're brought together through your employee portal or maybe through links within the LMS. And in this particular case, in the case of GE, they very explicitly designed an architecture that allows all these different forms of learning to come together into one place. I mean, I remember very distinctly when I was, at a startup before I was even doing this, we built a model in 1998 to, build essentially a platform to do this kind of stuff. We never got it done. We had a recession and a bunch of other things got in the way, but this is the vision we've had for learning for a long, long time. And you can do this now, because not only do we have all these wonderful platforms, but they all interoperate with each other like never before. So most of these cloud-based platforms have open interfaces so they can be lashed together relatively easy. So that's kind of, a vision of where it's probably where things are going to go. In the terms of the employee experience, there's going to be a lot of parts to this. Google Glass is being repositioned as a learning tool. I mentioned the company that I went to see the other day called Striver Labs that has an incredible virtual reality learning experience. You may be skeptical about VR, but it actually is an amazing tool for safety training, compliance training, customer service training. I'll let them tell you a little bit more about it. We will have more access to data through pulse surveys and other coaching and performance management tools, which will make learning more relevant. Activity streams and wikis are now available in almost every mobile platform. So when somebody has something to share, they can share it. The new Workday learning platform has a campaign function that allows you to create learning campaigns. So you can send streams of content out to people in different audiences very, very easily based on actually a new activity, a new event that took place in the company, or perhaps a job change. When somebody changes jobs, maybe they get a stream of things to read about that new job. There are kind of prerequisites getting started. And then gaming hasn't gone away either. We don't look at it as games anymore, but it's built into learning, the concept of creating points, of getting credentials for people sharing your content, of creating greater authority based on your expertise. Those are all built into this too. So we're going to be able to use all of the things we've been studying about behavioral economics, gamification, and user interface design in the new world of learning. And this is something that you're either going to do yourself or you'll be able to get from any one of many consulting firms that know how to do this. GE's been pioneering this. AT&T's been pioneering this. Visa's been pioneering this. Qualcomm, MasterCard, British Petroleum, T-Mobile. This is not, we're past the stage of talking about things that might happen. This is happening. And that's what's exciting to me is we don't have to sit around and on whiteboards and wave our arms about what we think digital learning is going to look like, which we've been doing basically for the last 3 or 4 years. There's been a lot of sort of ideas and pontification and guesses as to what's going to happen. It's now happening. And so what I've been trying to show you is, what you really can do today to build this changed new world of learning in front of you. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be easy. Most of you, and I think this is the vast majority of you, probably have something in your learning environment that's old. You have content that's old. You have tools that are old. You have an LMS that's old. You might have a situation where you have 10 training departments or 5 training departments. You haven't standardized or consolidated to one platform yet. Maybe you're changing your core talent system and the new learning platform isn't available yet from that vendor. I mean, believe me, I've seen almost every possible case. It's really an important time for you to sit down and develop a strategy. I was with a company day before yesterday who showed me their new learning strategy, and it basically involved looking at all of the elements I showed you earlier and putting together a business case to their leadership about why they have to do this. And it turned out to be, in that particular company's case, about a $5 or $6 million project. They're a very large company. And we were talking about what is the business case for this? What is the ROI? Well, that particular company just acquired another company, and they're going through a massive internal transformation and digital transformation as they build out a whole bunch of new products. And what we concluded after going through it is the only way those transformations are going to be successful is if the people can be transformed along with it. And if you don't have a digital learning environment and the right kinds of culture and artifacts and tools, it's going to be way harder. It's not saying it's not possible. I mean, you can do a lot of, great learning stuff without a lot of technology, but it's going to be a lot easier. And what they concluded after, a couple of hours of discussion is that the digital learning initiative, the digital learning program, the new learning strategy is fundamental to the company's evolution and the company's transition to the next stage. I was on the phone at 3:30 this morning with a company in India having exactly the same conversation. So this isn't just something that looks kind of nice and it's kind of fun and it's something you might want to try. I think there's a mandate for it, and I think most of you probably, if you're in this webinar, you're probably feeling the pressure from your employees. And by the way, going back to the very beginning of the presentation, if you don't do this, your employees will look elsewhere. They will look elsewhere for information, they will look elsewhere for skills, and they will eventually look elsewhere for jobs. And none of us want to have that happen in a tight labor market like we have now. So just kind of remember that if you're having a hard time cost justifying why this is important, this is part of the employee experience, a very important part, and perhaps the most important part for many of the segments of your workforce. So it's an exciting time now that it's all come into focus. I would just leave you with one more sort of, message. We are here to help you. We are I'm an analyst. I study this stuff, a lot. We have 30 people or so here who do this kind of research. We are constantly trying to keep up with this, and we learn from you. So I would encourage you to reach out to me or anybody in our business for more support or more help or more information, and share what you're working on, and we'll be happy to help you. Cornerstone, by the way, let me just make one plug for them. Cornerstone OnDemand is one of the most successful companies I've ever seen in the talent and learning market. And they are a great partner if you do happen to be doing business with them, because they understand all of these issues and have done a really good job of building a lot of this new technology right into their platform. So let me just sort of tip my hat to them since they sponsored this whole webinar. Okay, Holly, I'm going to stop there, and I don't know what we do if we have any time for questions, but I think we have about 5 minutes left. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Josh, for a great presentation. We have had quite a few questions come in over the last hour. We certainly won't be able to get to all of them in the last 4 minutes that we have, but we'll get to one. And then those questions that we don't get to ask in this segment, those will be passed on to Josh, and he can follow up with you later. So the first question that came in today was actually a little bit of a joint question between Christopher and Lisa. They both wanted to know one thing, so I decided we'd ask that one first. So how is MicroLearning different from a performance support tool or job aid? And the way that Christopher worded that is he said, how has manager engagement reinforcement been calibrated in that statistic, or is it isolated to just the learning experience? And I believe that may have been a follow-up to that initial question. So for time's sake, why don't we just keep on topic of MicroLearning versus performance support tool?
Well, I suppose you could say that MicroLearning is a form of performance support. But if you actually look at the market and look at the tools, performance support tools are specially designed systems with MicroLearning in them that are very knowledge aware of the context of your work. So if you're running SAP and you have to do a transaction, you don't know how, you're trying to enter an order, you're trying to fix something, a performance support tool will literally interject learning in the flow of work, knowing context, the context of the transaction you're trying to complete, and give you help. They're like online help. And online help is great, and it is a form of MicroLearning. So you could, and there are tools for that, and there's from specialized vendors, and you'll find that those vendors align themselves to systems and problems and programs that are either you either have them or you don't. MicroLearning is a more generalized version of that, where a lot of the content is developed inside of your company. So we had a wonderful meeting with British Telecom years ago at one of our conferences, where they had this problem of support people going out into small towns in the UK, running across a phone system that was so old and so arcane that nobody had ever touched it before, and they had to fix it. And so this poor service guy is driven 2 hours to get to somebody's house, and then he shows up, and the thing in this house is he doesn't know anything about it. So how's he going to deal with that? Get on the phone with somebody, do an online video? Well, what they found is if they could equip their agents with little video devices, back then they were little video recorders, now it's built in your phone, and ask them to videotape the problem solutions that they had done on any device they know how to fix, and just tag it and upload it into a video sharing portal, they basically could create a performance support system developed and created by the employees on the job. And so I think there's a fine line between the two, and so I don't want to get into sort of mnemonics, but I think they're related, and I think you can go further. But generally, you'll find is the performance support systems, which many of them come from SAP or related companies, they're designed to support that particular product, and they have tons and tons of content carefully designed for that thing. So very good question. It's a big market. But you can basically build your own performance support if you get your micro-learning program off the ground.
Thanks so much for that thorough answer, Josh. We're at the bottom of the hour, but let's squeeze in one more question from Lindsay. She says, what are the quantity markers at the bottom of the chart? Questioning the months, and this regards slide number 29. So we'll go back there now.
Slide 29. Oh, I think those are weeks. So it's pretty fast. You lose 20%. Yeah, those are weeks. You lose 20% of your memory of what you learned within a week, which I'm surprised is not more like hours, to be honest. But I'm pretty sure this research, you can see the content, the source there, and this was the content for anatomy, where they teach you, what is the heart and what is the aorta and what is this and that in your heart and your body. So, they studied it a lot, because this is, in the medical profession, you got to learn this stuff. You don't have any choice. This isn't something they want you to forget. But you can see it's a pretty short period of time. It's probably getting shorter the more we get distracted with more online stuff, but concept hopefully is clear.
Yeah, I'm glad we were able to get to Lindsay's question. And so we are a minute over, and we'll go ahead and wrap up our discussion for today. And we'll close with one more thank you to Josh, as well as everyone at Cornerstone for help making today's webcast possible. As always, we appreciate all of our busy members who took time out of their Wednesday to tune in. And from all of us at HCI, thank you for joining us, and have a great afternoon.